So what exactly is Amazon S3? Well, by now you've probably figured out that it's a cloud storage service. So the actual formal definition of Amazon S3 is this. Amazon Simple Storage Service is cloud-based storage that can store an unlimited amount of data and retrieve that data anytime over the web. It's highly scalable, reliable, fast, and cost-effective data storage built on Amazon's global infrastructure. So where exactly is your data stored? Well, your data is stored in a region, and a region represents a general geographic area. And you choose a region for your data when you upload it. And you can have data in, for example, the US West 1 region or also the US East region. There's no restriction on how many regions you can put data into. There's currently around 18 geographic regions. I show 4 push pins on this globe here just as an illustration, but there are definitely way more regions than that. So let's talk a little bit about what's inside of a region. Well, a region contains availability zones, and an availability zone, or AZ as you'll often see it referred to in documentation, or a lot of times that's how you will hear people talk about availability zones. An availability zone is an isolated facility. So essentially an AZ is a distinct data center in a region, and these different data centers are separated by enough distance so that if a natural disaster occurred or some other event occurred, that it wouldn't affect all of the availability zones in the region. Amazon S3 replicates data across 3 availability zones, and Amazon handles this replication automatically. So this is one of the huge benefits of using a service like S3. You upload your data behind the scenes. Amazon's taking care of replicating that to 3 data centers in your region and makes it very, very durable, really low probability that all the data centers would be taken out and you'd lose your data. So let's take a look at what's in a region and some other key S3 concepts. So it's important to know that S3 is object-based storage. So think of an object kind of like a file. And objects are stored in buckets, and buckets are created within regions. An object can be up to 5 terabytes of data. There's no limit on bucket size or total data in your account. Permissions can be set on buckets and individual objects, so you have really granular control over access. There is no hierarchy, and this is really important to know. So I have my region here, US East 1, and inside of it, say I've created bucket 1 and bucket 2, and then inside of my buckets, I have objects. I can't create buckets within other buckets, and there is no physical folder structure within Amazon S3. As we mentioned earlier, files are replicated across at least 3 availability zones. There is one exception that we will talk about later, and that's the one zone infrequent access storage class. It's also really important to know the consistency model. So S3 provides read after write consistency for puts of new objects. And what this means is if you put a new object or create a new object, if you immediately turn around and read that object using its key, you will get the exact data that you just uploaded. However, for overwrites and deletes, the consistency model is eventual consistency. So if I overwrite an object with a new copy and immediately turn around and read it, I could get an old copy or stale version because it does take some time for the writes to propagate to all 3 availability zones. So I said there's no hierarchy, but you can represent folders logically by including a prefix in the object name. So for example, if I wanted to have a bucket called my-bucket, and inside of that bucket, I wanted to have a folder called my-folder, and then in that folder, I wanted to have an object called my-object.txt. Well, I can represent that by setting this text here in red as the full object name. So my full object name is my-folder/my-object.txt. So I can represent folders logically by including the folder name as a prefix on the object name. So what makes up an object? Well, an object is made up of a key, a value, a version ID, metadata, and subresources. So a key, This is the name of the object, somewhat like a file name, and it is used to retrieve the object. The value is any sequence of bytes that you want to store in the object. So it could be text data, it could be an XML file, it could be a binary file. There's no restriction on that. The version ID is a string generated by Amazon when you add an object to a bucket, and together the key and version ID uniquely identify an object within a bucket. Metadata is name-value pairs, and it's used to store information about the object. And you have system metadata, which is things like creation date, size, storage class, etc. And you have user metadata, which is custom metadata you add to an object yourself. And sub-resources are additional information such as the ACL owner or torrent file. Just a quick recap, know that when you upload data into Amazon S3, you choose a region that your data will be uploaded into. A region contains multiple availability zones or data centers, and your object data is replicated in those data centers automatically. You create buckets inside of a region, and you add objects to buckets.